Well, here we are, people. The final part. As I said, I was going to do all three parts, and now we've come to the end of the story. Owen, sorry for seeming this might be a little early or something. Unfortunately, I was moving some stuff. Luckily, I got a partner to help me move some of my furniture and move some stuff around the studio. Granted, it almost costed me my soul, but luckily I found out the free gift certificate. So, thank you, Mr.
Head, just call me Pinhead. Thank you for using Hellraiser Furniture Service. We promise you pleasures and sights like you have never seen.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Pinhead. Does it ever bother you that you hired furniture services from a living demon? No. Considering that Halloween was a couple of days ago, no, I'm not too worried. And besides, I didn't use my soul for the services. Really? You didn't use Trixie's soul, did you? No. I used Mike's soul. He's not using it much. Oh, brilliant. Thank you. And now, the finale of The Seal of Silent Hill. Let's begin. The Seal of Silent Hill, Part 17. Dean. Dean felt as though someone had just finished using his chest as a trampoline when he suddenly awoke, grasping, clutching, and clawing at the hard board beneath him to get his bearings. Guessing his breath was never easy in this place, but this time was worse. Dean tried to remember what had happened to them last, where he was. The first thing that struck him was that he was alone in what looked like a small supply closet. There was only the faintest light from the gray world outside pouring in through a tiny window. But Dean could see enough to know that there was no Cass, no Aaron, no Sammy. Sammy! The rest of it, what had last happened to him, what Dean had seen and come to realize, rushed to the front of his mind. The pyramid creature. Jonah. God. Jonah. And they had ran, made it to the hospital. But then Dean. Dean had confessed. What he had been thinking telling Sam the truth, admitting it so awfully like that. He never wanted to see his brother look at him that way. The way Sam had just stared when Dean told him, "I like to use knives." Dean shuddered. That thing! That monstrous executioner out there was him. It represented him and everything he had been while he was in hell. Okay, so maybe it was more like him on steroids. But it was still him. Dean had known that for the first time they saw that thing, before meeting it up close and personal, because he could never shake those memories from hell, when he was the same as any other demon off the rack, and good at what he did. It was his fault that Jonah had died in this place. If not for him, if not for Dean, then Silent Hill would never have thought up that awful beast of a not-quite man. If they had never escaped this place, is that what Dean would become again? Is that what happened to if they died here? They became the thing that haunted them, part of this hell? Like the hell Dean had come from. Cass and Sammy would be the ones on his rack. Dean dug the butt of his palms into his eyes. He had to stop this. He had to calm down. He couldn't afford to give in to those memories of bloods, blades, and screaming. He had to find his brother. His angel, Aaron. No one else was going to die here if he could help it. Sluggishly, Dean got off the floor, checking to make sure he still had his weapons. His handgun was tucked into his jeans, and he spotted his shotgun on the floor a few feet away. He got a shotgun! He snatched it up and checked while it was still loaded. He had almost dropped it when they were running from Pyramid Head. Priority number 1 had to be finding the others. Sam was still hurt. They hadn't been able to do much for his acid burns other than Castiel's initial heating. And Cass. He was in no shape to be fair against these creatures alone. Dean was less concerned about Aaron, but it would still be better if they were all together. Before leaving, Dean checked the supply closet for anything useful. He didn't find much of interest other than a few empty syringe wrappers and some cotton balls. but at least he knew for certain he was still in the hospital. Dean was well armed, and as steady and put back together as he could manage when he peered out the hallway. It was almost completely dark, but he was not surprised. Dean had thought of using his cell phone to see by, since he didn't have one of the flashlights. Then he remembered he could use his cell phone to detect creatures. He searched for it, but now that he was thinking of it again, he realized he couldn't remember the last time he had it out, or the last time he heard it crackle when they were in the presence of one of those monsters. Growling to himself when he found no sign of the phone on his person, Dean realized he could have lost it at any point. He had no way of tracking it down. He had to continue on blind. Since both ends of the hallway looked endless and black, Dean decided to head right. If he was quiet enough, careful enough, he should be able to avoid the monsters and find his companions without incident. At the very least, he liked being a wishful thinker, especially when thinking about anything else. About being here, alone, basically in hell. Had Dean standing on the threshold, losing it for good. But he couldn't. He couldn't cop out now. He had managed to overcome hell, and what had become of him, there were enough to continue hunting, and act as much as the old Dean as possible. Okay, so a little Jack Daniels helped out on occasion too, but he was getting better. It was getting easier. At least, it had been getting easier until they had came to this damn town. Dean moved with steady steps, shotgun ready and eyes alert as they adjusted to the dark. The hospital was cold, and Dean was only in a t-shirt and jeans. He felt the chill climb up his arms, make the hair stand on end. It was definitely from the cold, not fear. Not fear. A sudden crash made Dean's heart jump from his throat. That sounded like someone falling, or maybe someone crashing to the ground. There was a dim light ahead toward the end of the hall, a room or office with an open door. Dean headed for it, listening carefully for further sounds and signs that someone was there. He hoped it was Sam, Cass, or even Aaron, and he would have prayed if he thought anyone was actually listening. Dean inched toward the door. The crash and further rustling he could now distinctly hear was coming from deep within the room. When he first peered inside to look in the dimly lit office, he couldn't see much of anything. But as he continued on, he caught sight of a figure in a corner. A woman pressed close to the wall. It looked like a nurse.
"You alright there, sweetheart?"
Dean called, keeping his voice quiet, although he now could see he wasn't dealing with one of those monsters. The woman was definitely a nurse. White dress, hat, and damn, that was a short skirt. Couldn't possibly be regulation. Not that Dean minded the view. Of course, this chick looked way too pale to be healthy. Was probably scared out of her mind. She had her hands tucked in front of her, and he couldn't see her face.
"It's alright,"
Dean said as he approached her slowly, lowering his shotgun.
"I'm not gonna hurt you. Stuck here just like you. I'm looking for my friends. It's gonna be okay."
The poor thing was twitching. Dean wondered if she had been attacked and was injured. Besides that, though, it was actually kind of nice getting to talk to someone else down. It made it easier for Dean to push his own fears aside.
"It's alright. There aren't any of those creatures around. I promise."
As Dean was reaching out to touch the woman's shoulder, maybe to coax her to turn around, she spun toward him, revealing that her hands had hold of a scalpel the size of a butcher knife. Dean leaped back, barely avoided being slashed at. He stared, first immobile, as he looked agape at the not quite human nurse, who didn't have a face. I'm thinking about Miss Authors. I'm thinking about if they have more significance. I really am. Sam's neck was stinging with no pain when he aroused that he could hear his own voice crying into the dark before he had opened his eyes. It was as if the wound from that acid spitter had suddenly re-inflamed, sprayed anew with that burning liquid. And this time, there was no convenient angel to take the majority of the pain away. Sam realized he was alone, in an entirely different room than the entry he remembered losing consciousness around the time he was scrambling to his feet in search of a sink, cold water, anything to make the burning lessen. Thankfully, he was in an exam room with a bathroom, and the faucet worked. Cold water would only be a momentary reprieve, however. Rummaging through the cabinets, Sam was relieved to find real bandages and antiseptic cream to redress his wounds properly. He even lifted his eyes to the ceiling, silent grateful prayer at that. But then he had to shake his head at himself, because if the angels weren't what he expected, then what did that say about God? Not to mention Sam's doubts on there even being a benevolent higher being after finding himself in this place. Well, if you look at the way Supernatural Season 5 went, I think I know what God is. This was hell. Some awful suburb of it, at least. Sam was already so shaken. How had Dean endured decades of this? Worse, Dean had been constantly caught by blades like that of Pyramid Head creature, remained each day to be tortured again and again, unable to escape as they had here in Silent Hill so far. And then later, Dean had been the wielder of blades too. There came that bile again, building sourly in the back of Sam's throat. It just made him so nauseous. It wasn't that he saw Dean differently, or was disappointed, or ashamed of him. It wasn't that at all. But the way Dean had looked down when he said, "I like to use knives." Sam shuddered, finishing up the fresh bandages over his neck quickly. He knew his brother. He knew Dean was forever changed by his time in hell. But he also knew that somehow Dean had managed to hang on to himself. That in most ways he was still just Dean. Sam's smart-ass, women-loving, devil-may-care brother. Sam had to help Dean see that again. Of course, first he had to find his brother. Obviously, Sam was still in the hospital, though he had no idea where. Thankfully, he still had a gun on him, which would have to do until he could track down the others. Aaron had Sam's shotgun, after all. Aaron. Sam didn't have time to think of all the details not adding up in this place. He ventured out of the exam room, peering out into what looked like to be a long, dark hallway, before he could even begin to explore his new surroundings. There was a shotgun blast from the far off to his right. All Sam could think of then was Dean. "Dean!" Sam called out, foolish though it might be. He was too worried, too anxious being apart from his brother in this place, not knowing what horrors Dean might be facing alone. Sam had to find him. "Dean!" Boom! Another shotgun blast. So close that the sound ricocheted in Sam's eardrums and made him stumble back with a grimace. Then, suddenly, a figure toppling out of the room just in front of Sam, sickly limbs failing. It was a woman, or something like a woman. A nurse in a short skirt that seemed too tight, with ample amount of visible cleavage, and, God, no face. She didn't have a face. For a moment, Sam was frozen. As much as he was overrun with thoughts of his brother, all he could think of right then and there was how much the nurse creature reminded him of Jess. It had no hair, no features, but the body, the costume. Sam thought costume because his mind went straight to the one Jessica had been wearing the last night he ever really saw her. Before Dean appeared that same night, it whisked him to a life that wouldn't let him go. She had been dressed as a nurse, just like that. A sexy nurse, he had said, giving him that gorgeous slight grin as she did, and trying to persuade him to be her sexy doctor and dress up too. It would be a happy memory, if not what happened the next time he saw her. "Dean!" Sam called again, tearing his eyes from the dead nurse, and rushing around the corner into a room she had tumbled out of. He was immediately startled to find himself facing the barrel of his own gun, with Aaron clumsily wielding it. Sam's urgency was replaced with anger and accusation as he rushed straight at the aimed shotgun until he slammed Aaron back into the nearest wall. "Start talking! Now!" he demanded. Aaron's eyes were wide. He was terrified at his confrontation with Sam, as he probably had been attacked by the nurse. The shotgun remained wedged between them. For the moment, useless. I don't know what you mean. It was one of those monsters!" Aaron defended. "I'm not talking about the—" Aaron trailed as he cast a quick glance behind him at the desk-like figure on the floor in the hallway. It had to be on purpose. It had to be another damn message from the town.
I'm talking about this!
Sam growled as he spun back to face Aaron and gripped down low on the barrel of the shotgun, tearing it from the other man's of the head. I set it down on the front desk of the apartment building. We got sucked into the other world. When we got back out of it again, the gun was gone. And don't you even think of trying to say you just found it. It didn't happen to hear us in the room right down the hall. Sam knew he was probably overreacting and not exactly helping their situation here. But he was so frustrated, angry, and scared. And there was definitely something Aaron wasn't saying. No matter how much of a coward he pretended to be. I did, okay? I did hear you down the hall when I found the gun, Aaron admitted, not looking at Sam really, his eyes starting wildly and erratic. But I just wanted to get out. I thought, with a weapon I could get out of this town. So I ran, and then, when I got to the edge of the town, there was an actual edge! No more road, nothing! I didn't know what to do, so I came back! When they first met Aaron, they had told him they didn't think there was a way out of town, but they hadn't actually remembered why they knew that. Apparently, Aaron had found out for himself now that they were now surrounded by a bottomless drop-off on all sides. Sam was still hesitant to trust him. You're not being honest with us, he told Aaron plainly. We can't help you get out of here if you don't tell us everything you know. This is not some nightmare you're going to wake up from, Aaron. I know. I know. Aaron grimaced and tried to sink away from Sam closer to the wall. Then suddenly, his eyes darted up, and he made eye contact for the first time since Sam had slid him back. My sister! Did you find her? Did you see her in the apartments? Sam was immediately disgusted. This guy dared to even ask when he had just run for it instead of looking for his sister himself. So far, we've only found Jonah. That would have been the guy you saw severed in half out there earlier. Cowed, Aaron swallowed and looked at Larry again. Forget it. Forget it. I don't have time for this if you're just going to keep evading me. Thank you for actually trying to help us back there, but I still don't trust you. Just come on. Sam pulled away from Aaron finally, keeping the shotgun for himself. We need to find the others. They have to be around here somewhere. A scream split the quiet around them, making Sam tense and raise his shotgun in alert. He looked wearily back into the hallway, where the nurse was still lying motionless. That had been a woman's scream. Eek! Holding Aaron behind him and motioning for the other man to be silent, Sam crept closer to the doorway. He could hear the mumbled voices now. A woman and a man, somewhere out in the hall. Sam was done trusting every wayward person he discovered in this place. He readied himself to stay on the defensive and move to ambush the newcomers first. If the general fatigue in Demi's body was not already enough to debilitate Castiel, then a crowbar to the head certainly had not been an improvement. The piercing scream from the young woman that he was now with was not helping either. Castiel reminded himself that he had to be patient despite his pounding head. I am quite certain that creature is dead, he said, looking down the hall where they spotted a monster shaped like a woman, a nurse it seemed, without a face. She had clearly been shot several times and lying motionless on the floor. How can you be so damn calm? The young woman exclaimed back, blonde, fidgety, and dressed in a style that Castiel believed Dean had once called punk, though it might have been trashy. You're not expecting exactly an opposing figure here, pal, the girl went on. But there you go again, acting like this is all some walk in the park. In actuality, Castiel thought their situation in no way like some walk in the park. He was still very concerned about his charges, who were, as of now, still missing. Castiel hoped this body meant that Sam and Dean were not far. Then, he was guiding the girl down the hall with one hand, holding an ice pack to his head with the other that she had provided him after mistaking him for one of the creatures. Sam Westchester leapt out of the room just ahead of them, brandishing a shotgun. It would just be Castiel's luck to get a hole blown through Timmy's chest right about now, when he clearly was not as capable of shrugging off bullets as he had been when he first met Dean. Cass! Sam breathed relief, lowering the gun immediately. Thankfully, so that the girl did not get a chance to scream again. "Are you all right?" Sam went on. "What happened? Is this Aaron's sister?" Aaron, who Castiel would now see as was behind Sam, looking rather sheepish, shook his head at the same time the girl spoke up. "Don't know any Aaron. Single child. Thank you. The name's Charlie. So you know Mr. Stuffed Shirt here?" "Charlie?
Charlie?
When did I get to season 8?" Castiel kept a benign expression, so as not to appear bristled by that comment. He looked more rumpled than usual, in just a button-down shirt and slacks, he thought.
Charlie, that is not a name I would have guessed for a woman,
he found himself saying, before really thinking about it, remembering that Charlie was usually taken for Charles, and therefore was a male name. Castiel had not actually gotten to ask the girl her name before. "It's Charlotte." She rolled her eyes, as if he missed something obvious. "Nice to meet someone with a real weapon." She sided up to Sam, eyeing his shotgun more appreciatively than Castiel thought necessary. He himself had a knife after all. But he understood that a firearm was more practical with these creatures.
"Nice to meet you,"
Sam said, leaning away from Charlotte, as though she made him extremely nervous for some reason. Though Castiel thought it might have been more she was clearly inappropriately interested in the younger Winchester.
"I'm Sam. This is Aaron.
Have you seen anyone else? No Dean?" Sam looked at Castiel, at the girl around the girl at Cass. It bothered the angel that there was still no sign of their final missing companion.
"I had hoped he was with you,"
Castiel said, lowering the ice pack from his head.
"We need to find him quickly. There was no doubt more creatures like this about."
He gestured down at the nurse.
Sam nodded. "Once we regroup, we can take more time to sort out what we know. First, we have to find Dean."
Castiel already knew the big secret. It did not tell him where to find Lilith like he had hoped. And since he knew what people in Silent Hill all had in common, he had not seen it necessary to probe Charlotte just yet. She had one thing in common with the Winchesters for certain, and more than just a slight resemblance to. Castiel took a pause for a moment. The girl looked like a very young Mary Winchester, which he realized also meant that she looked a lot like Jessica Moore. Perhaps that was the real reason Sam was wary of this girl. Heading further down the dark hallway, Sam and Castiel led the others, with Charlotte immediately beginning to chatter at Aaron the way she had with Castiel before they stumbled upon the nurse. She was not a native of Silent Hill like Aaron, so she had been to the town when she was younger, and not entirely sure how she ended up here. Castiel appreciated that most of the chattering at him earlier had been concern for his real billing, after Charlotte had mistakenly struck him over the head with a crowbar, but it had not helped his headache. And if this was Silent Hill 3, we would have 3 different crowbars, a silver, a gold, and a normal. Noticing that Sam was eyeing the ice pack, Castiel once again had pressed to his throbbing temple. He turned and looked at the taller man questioningly, until Sam asked him, "So, what happened to you exactly?" At that moment, Castiel was fairly certain he was experiencing a very human sense of humility. He opened his mouth to respond, but then stopped. He stood completely still, listening. He even hushed Charlotte over his shoulder. It was Dean. Castiel could hear Dean. It sounded like he was scuffling with somebody.
"Quickly!"
he said by way of explanation, taking off ahead of the others, zeroing in on the other sounds he could now clearly hear. Thankful enough he was now intelligent enough that he could hear Dean from far away. Dean was in trouble. Dean needed his help. Castiel could not let either Winchester die in this place. Sam was hot on Castiel's heels, his long legs nearly carrying him ahead of Castiel several times, until finally the angel was sure they had reached the room Dean was in. At first, he could only see a lost shotgun on the floor of the room in front of them, and one of those nurse creatures pressed close against the far wall. Then Castiel saw Dean, just beyond her, grappling with her as he struggled to wrestle a large knife from the nurse's hand. "Dean!" Sam called out, already racing to Dean's side, ready with his own shotgun. Not that he could take a clear shot with Dean in the line of fire. Castiel forgot about Charlotte and Aaron entirely as the ice pack fell from his tightly clutching fingers, and he pulled out his borrowed knife to aid as well. But Dean had managed to overpower the nurse on his own, knocking her back and giving Sam all the room he needed to take an almost point-blank shot that blew off the creature's head and crumbled to the floor at Dean's feet. Castiel could admit that the sight nauseated him somewhat, even though he had once seen the very depths of hell. And yet, the mere sight of Dean beyond the fallen body of the monster, alive and well, how all of them were somehow still alive despite having been separated, filled Castiel with such overwhelming relief. He had failed the Winchesters too much already to lose Dean in a fight that he could not assist him in.
Hey, Sammy. Cass.
Dean said with one of his alluring grins.
Gotta head to this place for one thing. Even without a face. At least nurses are still hot.
Ah ha 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 ha! That's our Dean! And join us next week on Fandom Fridays for more. That is our Dean Winchester that's our brothers. And of course, now all you Supernatural fans are listening to this are right now thinking of that sitcom opening for Supernatural. The scary part is the theme is playing right now in my head. Dean was not feeling nearly as nonchalant as he was pretending about what had just happened with the faceless nurse. His head had already been spinning with too many thoughts of hell. Then, when he thought he had an outlet for feeling like a hunter again, like he could help someone, his damsel in distress turned out to be a monster after all. Dean was lucky to be able to fend her off as well as he had before the others found him, and he was beyond relieved to see them all. Even the stranger.
Who's this? Aaron's sister?
Dean pointed to the young blonde who had been added to their crew, and who, despite having shorter hair and somewhat trampy clothes, looked strikingly enough like Joe Harville. Dean tried not to stare, and looked instead to Aaron for an answer. But the man in the polo shirt was shaking his head.
This is Charlotte,
said Castiel.
Charlie.
He immediately amended, with a slight wrinkle to his nose, as if the name displeased him.
And she is not Aaron's sister, but another of the inhabitants of this town. We must work quickly to discuss what we know and how to best proceed. I believe Charlotte is the last of the others we'll find, unless, of course, Aaron's sister is actually accessible to us.
What's that supposed to mean? Aaron jumped to the defensive.
Stay focused,
Sam sternly. He paused a moment to grip Dean's arm and squeeze in reassurance. Or maybe it was to take reassurance, since Sam looked even more relieved to have found Dean than the other way around. It was dark in the office, as it had been when Dean first went inside, but it looked like the blonde chick Charlie had a flashlight, as did Aaron, since he had managed to hang on to their bag of supplies. The added light made Dean feel a martial sense of safety, being able to see now that the office was really not all that large. Dean hopped up onto the desk behind him, leaving the immobile body of the dead nurse where it lay. Others gathered around him, all of them, even the ones he didn't really know, looking to him as a leader for some reason. Dean really didn't feel like being a leader right now. Conflict of interest or some shit, wasn't it? And what with the other version of Dean being one of the big bads out there. Sam should be leading, not him. But Dean managed to huff to catch his breath and said,
Okay, so, what do we know so far? Here's a good place as any to take stock, right?
Wait, we should turn off these lights, Sam said, taking Aaron's flashlight right out of his hands and flicking it off. I know it's a pain, but I think those things are drawn to the light. See, Sam was a smart one. He should take charge, not Dean. Not here. Dean didn't even like the idea of being in the dark again. How pathetic was that? He was a little soothed that it looked like Sam had managed to rebandage himself. But Cass wasn't looking so hot, and Dean definitely didn't like what they had two strangers with him now, instead of one. Charlotte didn't immediately listen to Sam about turning off her flashlight. She flicked it around the room instead. Sure, I just love the idea of chit-chatting in complete darkness with a bunch of men I don't know. Genius idea, she grumbled.
You have nothing to fear from us,
Castiel said, ever the unassuming and non-threatening male figure. Granted, the guy was an angel, so Dean didn't think that was quite the right way to put it. Was Cass even really male? That was awkward to consider for some reason. Sure thing, smooth talker. Charlotte crocked an eyebrow at Cass. But even if that's true, I do got something to fear for those walking nightmares lumbering around, and I'd rather be able to see them coming. This place isn't exactly SHIT! Charlotte's blue eyes suddenly went wide, her arc of light having been landing right on Dean in the desk. Dean! Sam dove forward to grab him, but it was already too late. Impossibly strong arms had wrapped around Dean from behind and were pulling him backwards through the broken window into the adjacent office they hadn't bothered to notice. Panic caught at Dean's throat, but he was not about to be done in by one of these faceless bastards. He could tell by the shape of the thin arms and the large scalpel in one hand that it had to be another one of the nurses. Dean's shotgun was in the other room, but he was far from helpless. Slamming his head back into the faceless bitch and hearing her grunt and wheeze as he stumbled back, Dean loosened her hold enough to jab an elbow into her stomach and to break free. Quickly, he whirled around and reached back for his pistol, but the nurse was faster. She twitched, her head cocking at a disgusting angle. Then she lunged, stabbing into Dean's left shoulder. Dean! It was Castiel calling now, and Dean was struggling to pull his gun and somehow managed to blow the nurse's face off. The angel came running into the room, ahead of Sam and the others, and stuck his borrowed knife into the monster's back. They were mobilely connected for a moment, from angel to monster to Dean, all through blades. The nurse reared around, leaving her scalpel at Dean's shoulder, but Castiel took her down to her knees with one aimed punch. Dean was pretty impressed with that, especially with how fatigued the guy looked, but he took that his cue to finish the job, pulling his gun finally and putting a bullet in the nurse's head. She toppled over, dead. Good riddance, too. Dean's shoulder hurt like hell. Dean, please sit. We must attend to your wound. Castiel immediately took Dean's hand and led him over to a table. This office was larger than the other one. It seemed to be littered with medical supplies, almost too conveniently. Damn Silent Hill, Dean thought, completely messing with them. Sam came in and started rummaging for supplies to treat Dean's shoulder. Just when Dean thought that at least one of them was still in tip-top shape, physically anyway, he had to go and get sliced up by an evil but still disturbingly sexy nurse. Now all of them had some kind of handicap. It wasn't as if they could count on Aaron or the new girl. At least it looked like Sam had found some of the bandages, and a cloth he was able to wet a sink in the corner. Castiel took the job of removing the knife from Dean's shoulder, and, stained right now or not, Dean was thankful for the slightly added strength in the angel's grip, because it didn't hurt as nearly as much as it might have. Dean still grit his teeth with a grunt of "Fuck!" as he gave Cass a grateful look afterward, so the angel knew that Dean appreciated what he had done. Everyone seemed to be coming to Dean's rescue, and it was starting to get to him.
Damn it! Here I go wasting everyone's time again.
Dean grumbled, not really meaning to be heard, definitely not looking for sympathy. But here it was. Sam came over with a cloth and bandages wearing a prominent scowl. Making sure we're all in good enough shape to stay alive isn't wasting time, Dean. Quit being a baby, he said, mostly to ease the tension as he tossed a half-smile at Dean. Sam knew him too well, and had to know that Dean would not be forgetting the Pyramid Head creature, and how it was connected to him anytime soon. Sam was also a good enough brother most of the time that he would not bring any of that up again until they were alone. Looking away from those damn puppy eyes, and casting his gaze down at the table instead, Dean spotted a bottle marked health drink, whatever the hell that was supposed to mean.
Too bad real life isn't like a video game,
Dean joked, looking up at Cass and Sam, who were both close beside him now.
I could just take that there and be all better.
Aaron, who was looking especially anxious right now, walked over and picked the bottle up. He shook it. Empty. Fuck! Who wrote the difficulty on this level?
Ugh, probably would have tasted like shit anyway.
Dean shrugged, and then hissed because Sam was still cleaning his hood and shrugging hurt like a son of a bitch. Dean, Sam said in that reprimanding motherly tone.
Sorry. Just don't want us staying in one place too long. Can we hit two birds here and keep going over what we know? Treating me might be necessary, but coddling me isn't. We're a full crew again. So, where do we stand on all this?
Dean eyed Charlotte particularly, who was being quiet since it had been her light that brought the nurse. She had given the flashlight now to Cass, who was using it to shine light on Dean's wound while Sam wrapped it up. I found another message in the blood when I awoke, Castiel said matter-of-factly, as though finding messages in blood was a common occurrence. So, for them, maybe it was. I believe I figured out what it is all these people trapped here have in common. There was a sudden clang as Aaron tripped over a metal cart in the dark, losing his hold on the health drink that crashed to the floor, and falling with his own tumble to the ground that was about as far from graceful as a guy could get.
Smooth,
Dean wanted to say, but before he could speak, he spotted a silver necklace that had fallen from Aaron's pocket, sparkling up at him on the floor. It looked exactly like the locket that should at the moment still be with him. Dean checked it jeans, despite Sam's protest at moving. No locket.
Dean!
Sam called when Dean looked for the table, snatching out the locket before Aaron could hide it again. If it hadn't been for the sparkle of silver, Dean never would have noticed the necklace in the dark.
Where did you get this?
He demanded, as Aaron clumsily climbed to his feet, looking defensive and ready to bolt.
It was in my pocket, asshole! And I'm pretty sure you're not the slippery fingers type, which means you would have had to take it while I was out, which means you were awake! You better start talking right now!
Dean stepped into Aaron's personal space, even as Sam was coming up behind him to finish the bandages. Aaron's eyes darted around all of them, Castiel having moved in closer, and Charlotte having run around to stand behind them, since he was smartly got to the point that Aaron was not a trustworthy guy. He wasn't even trying to defend himself, just staring at all of them dumbly.
Fess up!
Dean growled, thrusting out the locket.
You got something more here to do with this place than you're saying, don't you? Don't you? You better come clean right now!
And then Dean saw it. He was holding up the locket he saw, had busted open when it fell from Aaron's pocket. The tiny pictures were floating in there, in front of his face. One of his faces was a young woman, dark hair, sad smile. Their faces looked remarkably alike, like twins.
This is your sister's locket, isn't it?
Dean said, pulling the necklace back in to keep it out of Aaron's race.
With the inscription, yours forever? Not exactly a sisterly message there, Aaron. Just what the hell is going on?
And of course, it was then that the siren began to howl. The paint was peeling from the walls, already upon the first blare of the siren, and like the world of Silent Hill was hungry for them, burning away to that horrific shell of itself eagerly. Sam knew things were getting worse if the town was changing again so soon. So it was also all the distraction Aaron needed in order for her to run.
Cass! Grab him!
Dean called as Aaron sprinted for the door, but Castiel was easily pushed aside, still not at full strength, obviously spooked by the arrival of the other world yet again, winded from having come to Dean's aid before. Aaron was long gone in moments, and Sam knew it would be foolish to follow him. Of course, that didn't stop Dean from starting at a dead run. He might have chased Aaron right into the black abyss, as Sam grabbed a handful of Dean's t-shirt from behind and tugged him back.
Dean, don't be stupid. We don't know what's out there, and you're not all patched up yet. It's good enough, Sam. Let go. Aaron might be in cahoots with Lilith and going out to lead these creatures right to us.
Dean tried to pull forward, as if he meant to rush on ahead anyway, without much effort. So Sam guessed that Dean was merely expressing his need to do something, not that he would actually run off half-caught. Dean was far from an idiot, or the impulsive type, despite popular opinion. Usually, it was Sam making those kind of mistakes. I hate it when this place gets bloody. Charlie shivered in response to the heinous theory, her blonde hair making her more or less visible in the dark and the red of the other world.
Hey, Cass, you okay over there?
Dean pulled away from Sam, Went over to check on the angel, who definitely looked worse for wear. Castiel pulled himself together, as best as he could when he turned to face Dean. But it was obvious he was far more in trouble than he had yet been, and very tired.
The message I found. That's the key. I assumed something terrible had become of Aaron's sister as soon as I first read it, and I expect a similar tragedy befell Charlotte at least once.
Huh?
What do you mean?
Sam pressed. Castiel had not yet told him the message he had found and said. The four of them gathered a little closer, keeping the flashlight Castiel had been using to help tend to Dean's shoulder muted between them. Sam also kept a very sharp eye on Charlie, because their track record with the others in this town had not been anywhere near good. Looking about as anxious and concerned as he had yet in Sam's opinion, Castiel retold the message he had read when he first awoke in the hospital.
All those who wander here lonely, allowed kin to die in their stead. Blame will be passed on accordingly, and the guilty will soon meet their end.
After Castiel finished speaking, Sam was pretty sure he was going to throw up now. It made so much sense. Dean cheated death the first time because their dad had traded himself to demons to make sure Dean wouldn't die. Sam came back for the same reason, because Dean had made a deal and went to hell for him. They were both alive because kin, family, had died in their place. It made the truth of that pyramid-head creature being some representation of Dean even worse, because it reminded Sam that Dean was the reason. He was the reason Dean went to hell in the first place. So really, it was his fault that the creature existed, not Dean's. So, you guys are trying to say that everyone in this town had some loved one die for them? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard! Charlie dismissed the whole thing with a wave of her partly polished nails. Only child, I said, remember? And my stupid parents are living their suburban middle-class boring lives as we speak. I don't fit your profile, boys, so why am I stuck here? Castiel looked rather put on that Charlie was shooting out his theory, which otherwise seemed perfectly sound.
Perhaps you are simply unaware of the sacrifice,
he suggested.
That don't make any sense either. We know, Aaron knows, and Jonas has now known what his drinking costs. Why would Charlie be the only one who doesn't?
He asked the obvious question. No one said anything, but Sam shared a look with Dean and Castiel that clearly agreed Charlie might be lying. He would have to watch her more closely right from now on. What does the riddle tell us for sure? Sam said. Maybe there's a clue in there about where Lilith and the seal are located. The what? The three of them ignored Charlie for now. They were way beyond caring if the locals actually knew what was going on. Blame would be passed on accordingly. So, where's the blame passed the most? Sam thought aloud. The jailhouse. Maybe more the courthouse. Charlie's story. School, she said, totally serious. Can't think of any place with harsher judgments than there. Sam had an initial dislike for Charlie that was not entirely the girl's fault. After spotting his first nurse and being reminded of Jessica, the last thing Sam had wanted to stumble upon was some young blonde girl who looked just like her. But she did make a good point. If Lilith is using a child host again, it would make a lot of sense for her to set up shop in the school.
Yes,
agreed Castiel.
There is a lot of background with the skull tied with past incidents of Silent Hill. It would make sense that the seal might be there. We need to move quickly. We cannot afford to wait for the other world to pass again.
Sam could tell that Castiel seemed especially worried. The last few times he had exited the other world, it got progressively worse for them all. It would be really bad if they got separated again.
We better keep an eye out for more nurses and anything else, Sam said, but we're running out of time here. We should get to the school as quickly as we can. Do you know how to get there?
He looked at Charlie. She was doing an impressive job, just going with the flow and at least having the appearance of calm. I'm not really a local, but I think I could get us there. Been a few years, though.
Good enough for me, said Dean. If anyone spots Aaron along the way, shoot the bastard! He's been playing us long enough. He has to have something more to do with this place.
But the evidence says he lost someone too.
Sam interjected. No! The evidence says that
Says like the rest of us. Dean Bonner exclaimed Charlie. He has to be the reason the loved one died. Now, maybe in our cases, it wasn't something we wanted to happen. But with Aaron, I'm wondering if he was a little more active in the process. Gotta be something more sinister to the whole thing. His sister gone, this locket saying yours forever. Ugh. Dean shivered as he clutched the locket in his hand. Sam had to agree that the whole thing was pretty damn creepy. Let's move, Dean said, looking up to his recovered shotgun and handing his Beretta to Charlie. You know how to use that, honey? The petite blonde shot Dean a look, then checked the clip and flipped it off to safety like a pro. What kind of world do you think we live in, sugar? I'm good, she said. That didn't make Sam any more trustworthy of Charlie, even if he did have just the same blue eyes and soft curving smirk. But they were really out of time now. They wouldn't survive much longer if they didn't find Lilith before the other world cut out again. Judging by how pale Cass looked, and how shuddery Dean was, no doubt still shaken by Pyramid Head and thoughts of hell, they might not last longer in the other world either. They had to go back outside. They had to go out into the most unprotected part of the other world, where that creature was. It was not Dean Winchester could very well be waiting for them. Even more frightening to Castiel was the prospect of what might happen when the other world vanished again. He would be expelled from Silent Hill, and Jimmy, Sam, and Dean would be left to face these horrors alone. Should be that way, whispered Charlie, as they slid down an emergency exit of the hospital. She had Dean's Beretta and was leading them to the school, where they believed Lilith and the seal might be laying wait for them. There was this distinct sound of flapping, of howling, and even distant shuffling, as if every creature they had so far come across might at any moment slip in and take one of them away. Sam and Dean were ever watchful with their shotguns now that Sam had returned from Aaron. There was no sign of the young man who seemed to have betrayed them. Castiel was not certain how Aaron was working with the forces of Silent Hill, but he was certain Lilith had to be involved, and that all no doubt went back to Aaron's sister. Why isn't anything attacking? Hissed Sam, keeping his aim higher to the sky in search of those flying creatures. And while Dean watched out more carefully for attacks by land, the burns on Sam's neck would still bother him. He gave no indication. Dean was not faring so well with his recently stabbed shoulder. He could not hold the shotgun as high as normal, and his aim would no doubt suffer because of it. He kept on anyway, scowling as he hissed back at Sam. Don't chase it, Sammy. Let's count our blessings and let's get to the school ASAP. The gray haze of the ash falling throughout the town made it impossible for Castiel to see anything more than his companions. He remained close to Dean, fearful for what might become of his charge, and especially if they did not find Lilith quickly. Castiel was forced out of the town. Will you quit it with the sad puppy eyes, Cass? It's really getting on my nerves. Dean snapped back at him. Castiel was never quite certain what Dean meant by puppy eyes, though it seemed to be a term more reserved for Sam. I apologize, Dean. I only wondered if you might prefer I take the shotgun so you do not aggravate your shoulder. Fine, was Dean's short reply, looking away from Castiel quickly. Castiel sighed. Dean would give the same response, no doubt, if he were missing a limb. Almost there, Charlie called back to them. A shadowy structure did indeed wait at them in the distance. They were keeping close to any buildings they passed, afraid too much that open space would invite every creature in town. Another few minutes, and they would be at the school. Dean. Castiel stepped closer, so he could speak to Dean more privately, violating the promise he had once made to respect Dean's personal space. Jeez, what is it? Dean growled. Are you trying to attract more attention to us? I need you to understand, Dean. The truth of what might happen when we are released from Otherworld again, Castiel said. Just say it! We're inside somewhere safe, Cass. But, Dean, Castiel broke off, clutching Dean's arm too tightly so that Dean hissed. Something was close to them. Some creature was close enough that Castiel could sense it, even with his diluted abilities. Sam and Charlie were ahead of them by several paces, since Dean had stopped when Castiel grabbed him. The first glimmer of a figure moving in between them and the others appeared like glowing embers out of the haze. Castiel began to make out other glowing points around them, as he realized he had been able to sense the creature, not because it was powerful or large, but because it was one of many. So many.
Sam! Charlotte!
Castiel called out. Dean had seen the small moving points of light as well, and he took off running to catch up. Sam and Charlie both turned, but they were already surrounded by the small, crawling creatures that looked like they were burning. Dean took aim and fired, unable to tell, and no doubt caring as to what exactly the creatures were. But Castiel, his humanity more visceral than ever with how connected he was to Jimmy in the first place, grew nauseous the moment he saw the creatures clearly for the first time. Charlie must have seen them too, because she was screaming. They were children. Small, crawling children. Practically infants, with pleading-like murmurs falling from their small lips, like they were only asking to be held. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I am going to put on my psychology glasses and say that this basically represents Sam and Dean's lost childhood. This could not be any more obvious.
Holy shit! Oh shit!
Said Dean, pausing only a moment when he recognized the form of these new creatures before he fired again. Quickly reloaded. A line of burning children separated them from Sam and Charlie. These creatures were living ashes, and streaks of black along the pavement as they moved, swarming like insects to surround Sam and Charlie more closely. Sam was picking them off with his shotgun, much like Dean, a sour but resolute expression on his face that Castiel knew as much of a mask as Sam or Dean could manage being forced to kill what looked like tortured children. Reloading after each pair of shots was taking too long, and there were so many additional rounds stuffed into Sam and Dean's pockets. Charlie wasn't firing at all, but backing away closer to the building they had almost reached. Cass could not quite make out her face, but it looked wide with terror. More so for these not children than he had seen on her face before. The only weapon Castiel had was a knife, which hardly seemed helpful when long range was better to fend off a swarm. There was no telling how little time they might have before the other world ended again, and Castiel was forced out. He turned to look behind him, and spotting the denizens more and more of the small points of light all around him in the darkness. They were not killing enough to make up for the sheer mass about to descend.
Dean, take my hand!
Castiel shouted, grabbing Dean by the wrist before Dean could reply, and disrupting Dean's last shot so the shell pelted into the pavement.
Cass, what? Now!
Was all Castiel said in explanation, charging forward, leaping over the line of creatures so they could at least reach Sam and Charlie. He had enough strength in him to lift Dean only a mere touch on the wrist. Dean looked shaken, being somewhat flown in the guise of an inhuman leap. He turned to Castiel with eyes wide once he had snatched his hand back.
Warn me next time!
He shouted.
But I did,
said Castiel. Dean grumbled, pumping his shotgun to fire another round at the creatures that were pulled in around them, tighter than ever. The building was close behind him, now with fewer creatures blocking their path.
We must get inside,
Castiel said.
We'll be overrun.
Sam nodded and took after Charlie, who was still shell-shocked. She slowly backed away, the gun she had taken from Dean, and seemed more than capable of using hanging limp in her hand. Castiel grabbed for Dean again, ignoring Dean's process of being manhandled. It seemed so morbid when Castiel had to kick one of the burning children out of his path. But he knew better than to believe any form the creatures took on. Everything was a manifestation to make a point, not perfectly mimicking reality. These creatures weren't really children, but meant to invoke the feelings associated with children. The look on Charlie's face as they reached the door to the school said everything Castiel needed to know about who had been sacrificed for her sake. They found the door open, not a main door into the school, but one into the basement leading down. Unlocked doors were rarely welcoming in Silent Hill, but at least shut heavily and solid behind them to keep the creatures out and them safe. For however long that might last. Oh God! Oh God! Oh fuck! Charlie was chanting, mumbling incoherently, as Sam dragged her down the stairs through the darkness. There was a red haze in the walls, bright enough to see by, but it was still dark and menacing. Sam was being perhaps a little rough with the girl, but Castiel could tell she would not have been capable of moving without him. She clenched her arm from him, only to fall willingly to the floor. Posting herself up against the wall, where she let Dean's gun from her hand, wrapped her arms around her knees. "Oh, God! Oh, God! I'm sorry! I'm so sorry!" Castiel released Dean's wrist again, reaching out to squeeze Dean's good shoulder before he moved to Charlie. "Please, I need you to stay quiet," Sam was saying, knelt down in front of her. "We're safe from here now, but we don't know what's down here. It's all right. It was just more creatures. It's okay." "No, it's not," Castiel said simply. He reached him, crouching like Sam. The younger Winchester's face was worn, but sympathetic. Castiel had always admired that quality about most of brothers, their unyielding empathy for others. "You have all been very brave in the face of other creatures, but when faced ones built for you, it is very different, isn't it?" He looked at Charlie. Charlie turned her head away, hiding behind her knees, still chanting beneath her breath. "I would not presume to judge you, but I believe I understand now," Castiel said to her. "No siblings, not your parents. What else is left then, but the loss of a child?" A sob rose from Charlie's knees in response, but she did not look up. "An unborn child, perhaps." "Unborn? You mean she—" Dean's voice came from just above Castiel, but fell to a whisper. "Oh," Sam said, as if the realization tasted bitter on his tongue. You don't know," said Charlie, her voice muffled as he stayed curled in a tight ball. I, I, I didn't want to do it. They said it would kill me. No, that it would. That I could. I could have tried. I could have tried to save my baby. I should have tried, no matter the risk, but I didn't. I was scared, and I just couldn't go home after that. She sobbed. The girl's tough demeanor made much more sense to Castiel as a shield rather than a truth, and he wondered if she was home when she had been Charlotte more often than Charlie. I hate this place," she said.
"No argument here," said Dean. "We have to keep moving. You're not getting any judgment out of us. Don't let this place get to you. It's trying to break you down so that when death comes, you let it take you. I saw it already happen to a man who had bad things happen to him, but who wasn't a bad person. This isn't justice happening to us here, honey. It's just cruel."
"Come on. It's going to be okay," said Sam, taking Charlie's arm, but she resisted. "Just leave me here," she said, lifting her eyes to reveal streaks of black from her makeup. Then, suddenly, she was screaming again. Castiel whirled around, jumping back to his feet beside Dean. The basement was large and winding bits of machinery. From a standing position, Castiel could only see a bright glow first. Then a body crawled into view. It wasn't another child, but the figure of a burnt woman scrabbling along the ground, still on fire, lighting up everything she touched. Like the two women who had once burst into flames above Sam's head. Oh yeah, this is the fun part of Silent Hill, people. Dean always had an advantage over Sam. He hadn't seen their mother die with his own eyes. Sam had been a baby then, but it still happened above his head. Later, when it had been Jessica above Sam, he had been more than old enough to feel the sting that would linger from her loss. So it was only natural that Dean gave the burning female-like creature crawling before them along the basement floor no more than a passing glance before all of his attention focused on his brother. And the sheer horror on Sam's face.
"Don't forget what we were just telling Charlie, Sammy,"
Dean said, grabbing some of the last shells from his pocket and quickly reloading. His arms were covered in ash, just like Sam and Charlie Castiel's usually white shirt. His shoulder ached, not really properly tending to, since what he needed to do was rest and let the knife wound heal. Sam's neck was bandaged, still looked red and angry where the gauze wasn't quite covering everything. Charlie was a mess on the floor, screaming, but not moving. The only constant, seemingly steady thing was Cass. Thankfully, Sam didn't disappoint, reloading as Dean had, and swallowing down the tears and anger over what this place was making him see. His eyes were red and swimming when he looked at Dean and nodded to show that yes, he could go on because Dean needed him to, even if it hurt. And for that, Dean knew that it was a terrible parody of him, with the pyramid-shaped helmet to appear before them again. He wouldn't give up either. Both Sam and Dean fired. One shot each, aimed perfectly at the burning creature's head. Its movement was slow, like it only pulled itself up by its arms, not its legs. But it was only a few yards from them, and the shots to the head did nothing to still its progression forward. "What the hell?" Dean cursed. "Headshots work for everything else!" "Maybe it's the fire," said Sam. "Maybe we have to put it out." "With what?" "It doesn't matter. We must move further away from the door, or the creature will have us cornered," said Sam, as Castiel took hold of Dean's wrist, as he had several times in the last few minutes. Dean was too stunned to really resist. He wasn't used to the angel touching him, especially so frequently. Castiel always had trouble understanding personal space as far as proximity, but he had never been so hands-on. The continued acts of physicality worried Dean, because it said something about how perilous their situation really was if Castiel saw the need to physically move him out of harm's way again and again. The angel tugged at Sam too, urged Charlie to move quickly, all the while dragging Dean behind him, like a child around the creature's apparent path to where they had been. Dean didn't pull his arm away when they came to a stop, but stared at Castiel, seeing something into the two bright blue eyes that had nothing to do with being steady or constant. It was resignation, and not true surrender either, but some sense of having no control with no choice but to give in to that. "Cass!" "Sam, hurry! Charlotte, you must move!" Castiel called after the others, seemingly not hearing Dean. "We must escape this creature before the fire spreads." It was quickly spreading, flames licking the concrete floor, and machinery as if it had all been covered in gasoline. Everything the creature touched lit up with more flames to spread out around her. Sam moved quickly to join Dean and Castiel, but stopped to turn back and reach a hand out to Charlie. "Come on! It's slow enough! We can get away!" Charlie shook her head, her screams having died off, and all of her attention focused on the fire, making her blue eyes look strangely orange in that darkness. "Charlie!" Sam tried again. He started toward her as if to grab her by force, but the creature was getting closer, the flames thicker and spreading out wider around her, so that Sam's path was suddenly blocked. "Charlie, you can hurry! We can still make it!" Dean shook his head. He had seen the same look on Jonah's face. He knew Charlie wasn't going anywhere. The feeling of Castiel's hand on his wrist, squeezing tightly, made Dean look over. The resignation Dean had seen was accompanied by a deep sorrow, like guilt. "Cass, we don't have time," Castiel said. Somehow, Dean didn't think that Castiel only meant they didn't have time to save Charlie. "Dean, we have to do something!" Sam shouted as he ran to them, looking back frantically at the burning creature, lumbering slowly toward Charlie. The fire had started to surround her. Dean stared at Castiel. "We can't save her, Sammy," he said. "But we have to! We have to do something! She looks just like—" Mom, Dean thought, finally turning to look at Sam. But soon his eyes met his brother's. He knew Sam wasn't thinking about their mother. Charlie looked Jess, because Jess had looked like Mom. And now, Charlie was burning too. Her screams were renewed, loud and terrible over the roar of the fire that seemed spurred on by how it touched flesh. The burning creature was moving faster, glowing brighter, so that Dean couldn't see Charlie at all anymore. He had to pull away from Castiel when he saw Sam move to run forward, latching onto his brother's arm to stop him from dashing into the fire like some doomed hero. Dean shook his head again. They couldn't save everyone. They couldn't save anyone here, it seemed. "We must go," said Castiel, "before it comes before us, too. Before—" He trailed, leaving some other words of warning to fall away. Dean was coughing from the smoke, and out of breath because of it when he had finally made it across the basement and found a door leading up to the main areas of the school. Sam's face was pale and haunted, Charlie's screams still echoing around the room when they climbed the stairs to freedom. Another unlocked door with little relief to accompany it gave them entry. They were still in another world, leaving the school looking plastered with decay that might have been children, all red and suffocating like hell. Because it was hell. Some terrible suburb. "Hurry!" said Castiel, already moving, not bothering to give Dean a chance to catch his breath, or Sam a chance to mourn what he had seen, what he had lost and hadn't been able to save. Dean moved on autopilot anyway, gun raised and ready. Sam did the same. There were too many times in the past when they had to leave someone behind, like the night Dean had pulled Sam from his and Jessica's bedroom, even though Sam would have run right back into that burning house, if he had that chance.
"Cass, wait!"
Dean called after the angel.
"Give us a minute."
"No time," Castiel said, moving swiftly, taking classroom doors along the way that seemed to be locked.
"Lilith's nearby. I can sense her. There isn't any time." "Cass!"
Dean said more firmly, jousting ahead and grabbing Castiel's arm roughly to halt him.
"We'll get her, okay? We just need one—"
"No, Dean, you don't understand," Castiel nearly shouted. What had been resignation, then sorrow, was moving headlong into panic.
"What is it, Cass? What's going on?"
An echoing sound down the hallway as the furthest doors opened, the kind of double doors that usually led to a gym or auditorium. Dean's first thought that it would be Pyramid Head creature, but the figure he saw silhouetted in the doorway was a normal-sized man.
"Aaron, you son of a—"
"Oh, goody. We were beginning to think you weren't coming to the party." Dean's veins filled with ice at the sound of that voice. Lilith's childlike voice.
"No, Dean."
Castiel turned to him with the most stricken look of grief, blocking the path to Aaron and Lilith and clutching Dean's arms. Dean saw Castiel glance with equal anguish at Sam behind them. Then his blue eyes were steady, unwavering as he looked at Dean and said, "You'll be all alone." The siren had stopped. The darker gray of the world of normal Silent Hill was returning around them, making Dean feel nauseous and ready to faint already, wholly at the mercy of whatever Lilith was planning. But worse than that, worse than hearing Sam call for him and crumble behind him, was seeing the brief, blinding glow of white light from Castiel's eyes and mouth as the angel was driven from the town completely. And you know what, people? I think I'm going to just leave you all there. Toodles, join us next week when we'll probably do a Von Doom fic. Bye. Okay, I won't do that to you. Let's end this sucker, Sally! Sam's neck was stinging in pain again, aggravating from running and fighting, falling to the ground in a heap of dead weight after the other world kicked him out for what seemed like the dozenth time. He came to slower, sluggish after what had happened to Charlie. He hadn't even liked her initially, put off by her attitude, obvious flirting, and her striking resemblance to Jess. Especially when those damn nurses reminded him of Jessica, too. But Charlie, she had died because of him. He had been right there. Sam had been right there. He hadn't been able to pull her away in time. Haunted instead by screams when that burning creature that, again, was Jess, was so purely Jess, descended and burned Charlie to nothing. Sam hadn't thought about Jess in so long, but in Silent Hill suddenly, it was as if she was burned above him only yesterday.
"Join the party any time now, Sammy! Wake up!"
Came Dean's voice, close beside him, real and heavy, just like Sam felt. Dean sounded urgent, and borderline afraid, though, which was an emotion that almost never seeped in audibly to Dean's speech, if he could help it. Dean was scared. Scared because because the last thing they had seen was Lilith. Sam jolted fully awake, gritting his teeth at his acid-burned neck and trying to ignore the renewed pain. There was pain in his shoulders, too, from falling, and because his arms were wrenched behind his back by some superpowered goon. A demon. A run-of-the-mill demon possessing some poor bastard. Acting as lackey for Lilith even in Silent Hill. Dean was being held in similar fashion, and next to him was a third demon holding Castiel, all of them pushed down to their knees, prone and weaponless. No, not Castiel, thought Sam, remembering the bright angel's expulsion. The blue eyes were too dulled, too human and wide. He was actually shaking. It was Jimmy. Such a sleepy head, said Glow's little girl voice, a dark-haired girl this time, no more than 6 or 7 years old, wearing a pale pink dress. She was standing a few yards from them, in the middle of what Sam realized was a dingy gymnasium, with half of the bleacher benches missing. Some intricate spell had been drawn around her on the floor in what looked like blood. Aaron was standing beside her. I wouldn't want anyone to miss out, said Lilith. Too bad for Sona and Charlie. But everyone needs to bleed a little or the spell won't work. Isn't Silent Hill fun? She giggled, tilting her head and shrugging her shoulders like she had told some innocent joke.
Is this the kind of thing you want to get yourself involved with?
Dean said to Aaron, doing a better job of ignoring Lilith than Sam would have expected. Aaron shifted uncontrollably, his eyes darting to look at Lilith in unrestrained fear, and yet he did not move away from her. I had to, he said, for my sister.
Your dead sister, you mean?
Dean said harshly. Yes, Aaron said in small, barely there voice, his fist clenching more to ground him, it seemed, than to show any real anger at Dean. Lilith said, she said she would bring her back. I just made sure everyone got hurt and found their way here. You don't understand. I have to get her back. She shouldn't have died. She shouldn't have let things turn out like they did. Let you kill her, you mean? Sam said, calculating and careful. Aaron's instant jerk of reaction had Sam certain his hunch was right. You loved her, Sam went on. More than you should have, I'm guessing. Maybe she loved you that way too. But even if you didn't feel guilty about that relationship, she did, didn't she? She wanted to stop, but you couldn't let that happen. I know we're in the finale and this is supposed to be creepy, but ew, 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 ew! This is disgusting, Aaron! Ew!
Dude.
Dean grimaced, playing right along with how he realized what Sam was trying to do.
I knew that Lockett was creepy, and fucking your sister is pretty sick, but killing her because she wants to call it quits is about as low as it gets.
Oh, after this, I'm so going to need a bath. Aaron rushed forward, fire in his eyes that somehow managed to beat out all anxiety and fear, and any remaining guilt. Sam had the sick feeling that the expression on Aaron's face was the exact look his sister had seen. Sammy, Sam remembered with an even deeper pit in his stomach, right before the bastard killed her. Aaron had barely made it halfway to Dean before he jerked to a stop like he had hit some invisible wall and crumbled to his knees. Lilith just laughed from behind him. No, no, silly. That's just what those naughty Winchesters want you to do, she said. So you make my good soldiers lose their focus and let the boys go. Then they try and make all sorts of trouble. We don't want them going free, do we? Not yet. Aaron struggled to his feet, the fire in his eyes gone. His face a sickly green like he might throw up as he slung up back to rejoin Lilith in her circle of symbols. At least Sam knew that Aaron was an easy target, as he always suspected. But that wouldn't help him if they couldn't get out of the hold of these lesser demons. It's time now! It's that exciting! Lilith went on, grinning doubly. All of you have bled in Silent Hill, so... She frowned, trailing her eyes as she moved to Jimmy. But you haven't bled for me, have you? That mean angel was so hard to read. Too bad. He can't help you now. Best to make sure you offer a sacrifice for the ritual, too. She nodded to the demon, holding Jimmy down. Dean stumbled beside Sam, eyes filled with fear again, as he looked at Jimmy. Hey, wait! Jimmy's expression was utterly panic. Helpless as he returned Dean's look, with one of pleading that the elder Winchester could do nothing about. Cass! Dean called, as the demon slammed Jimmy's head down into the gymnasium floor with a large crack, leaving the man's face smeared with blood over a bent and broken nose, moaning and disoriented from the trauma. Sam knew that he didn't need to correct Dean, that Jimmy was the one who had just been rendered to the floor, not Castiel. But the slip seemed enough to please Lilith. So concerned for your angel. How sweet. I'll be sure to invite him to the next party. Don't you worry, Dean, and pluck off every one of those awful little feathers. She wrinkled her nose, like she was speaking of something truly disgusting. Sam felt pity for Jimmy, but he didn't have time to worry about small injuries, however painful, when Lilith was about to break a seal. You have what you need. It's enough. I've done enough, Aaron said, turning to Lilith with shaking, clenched fists. Now, bring back my sister. You have to bring her back. You promised! Lilith's eyes dropped, not yet displayed as black, but the little girl's eyes bright blue. Her expression softening, as if she felt some real sympathy for Aaron. She gestured Aaron to kneel in front of her. Then, turning toward him and revealing her profile. Sam's eyes widened, and looking to Dean. Only Dean was still staring at Jimmy. Turning back to Lilith, Sam was certain of what he could see glinting behind her back, tucked into the ribbon of her dress. She had a knife, and Aaron was inches away from her. Oh, silly boy. I'm a demon, said Lilith. I lied. What? Said Aaron, too slowly, not letting the truth sink in fast enough to move him out of the way. I'm not bringing your sister back, but I do need something from you, something everyone else has said already. The last sacrifice, you see, has to really mean something. Aaron! Lilith's small hands were already reaching behind her back for the knife. She smiled sickly sweet at Aaron as she brought the blade in front of her, allowing him only one brief moment of realization, of hesitation that wasn't enough to save him. And then she slashed, clearly slicing his throat, and blood sprang onto her pretty pale dress. Jimmy moaned, louder this time at seeing Aaron bleeding out onto the floor, though his voice sounded muffled by his broken nose and all the blood. Poor thing didn't really mean to kill his sister, said Lilith, proudly holding up the bloody knife. But then how many times have I heard that one before? Sam tried to keep his attention focused on Lilith, and how as Aaron's blood spilled out onto the symbols around her, she was starting to glow. But Jimmy was still moaning, mumbling and ranting about something Sam couldn't quite understand. Couldn't help but turning to look at their friend. It's okay, Dean was saying, closer to Jimmy, speaking smoothly. We're not beat yet. The demons holding them then laughed. Calm down, man. It'll be okay. Dean tried again. No, Jimmy said, hoarse and still muffled. You don't understand. She's summoning the god of this town. Merging with it. It's starting. He looked up at Sam, and the attention was drawn to Lilith, glowing brighter now, growing. And when it kills us, Jimmy sobbed, spitting blood out on the floor, we'll become like all the other monsters in this place. Sam didn't have time to take in Lilith's full transformation before her heart laughing as she called out to the other demons. Let them go. There is no escape for them now. Part 25, Jimmy. Jimmy wasn't always awake while Castiel was controlling his body. Considering Castiel didn't sleep or eat or even take a moment's rest, Jimmy had always thought of that as a blessing. He would have gone mad otherwise. He wished madness was the explanation for what he was seeing now. There was something inherently dark and terrified about Lilith in the body of a little girl. The contrast, the sheer vulgarity of an innocent child, like Jimmy's own daughter, being forced to do horrible things, covered in blood. But the creature, or god, that Lilith was becoming was so much worse. Large, grotesque, was still tailored to the survivors, the Winchesters. The creature bore resemblance to all the other personal monsters Silent Hill had made for them. It was wrapped in skin, faceless, but not quite male or female, still muscled and menacing. It didn't walk, it lumbered, and where the other world spread out like a disease, the floor gave way to metal and blood, bursting with offered blades, for Dean's benefit, Jimmy imagined, and as the creature took up its weapons, oil dripped from its skin like blood, threatening to erupt in flames. Even the demons holding Jimmy and the others captive gasped at the chains, shifting uncontrollably, and their fullest distraction was all it took for Sam and Dean to act. I just like to say, I would like Carl when I was annoyed by that girl from the Silent Hill comics, but I'm not here mainly because, well, it is Lilith and it works. Because she wasn't present all the time and she wasn't cussing like a little sailor. And, well, it just fits more with the story here. Jimmy felt paralyzed and useless in all of them as the brothers broke free and fought, regardless of the approaching creature Lilith had become. The weapons had been taken from them weren't far, but knives and guns would do little good against demons. Jimmy watched as Dean did the one thing that made any sense. He grabbed the Dean grappling with him by the shoulders and threw him in Lilith's path. The gruesome outcome of her transformed, larger feet crushing the demon like a bug was not as quite as horrible as how quickly the encroaching otherworld claimed what remained of him like a hungry animal. And soon he was part of the floor. The demon fighting Sam broke away, backing up toward the gymnasium doors with a surprising amount of fear projecting out of his black eyes. Then the demon holding Jimmy, the last of them, finally let go, scrambling away to catch up to his companion. They might have made it to the doors, too, if the other world hadn't gotten there first. It seemed Silent Hill didn't care too much for playing favorites now that its god was free. The doors leading out of the gymnasium melted away to reveal mesh metal, rusted, that looked out into the hallway beyond, where the pyramid head creature was slowly approaching with his oversized knife. Jimmy felt Sam and Dean before he really saw them, grabbing his arms and pulling him to get to his feet. Lilith was almost upon them. Pyramid Head was breaking down the doors. The demons were shaking in fear for their lives. Being immobile was hardly Jimmy's biggest problem, but he was thankful for Sam and Dean's rescue. Another moment more kneeling in that place, and he might have been beheaded. What do we do? Jimmy stuttered as he backed up rapid-fire fast to the other side of the gym. His vision wasn't entirely clear, still somewhat dazed from when that demon had smashed his face to the floor. She's slow. We could use that, Sam said, eyeing the creature gazingly, with only a brief glance at Pyramid Head peeling back the metal mess of the doors and grabbing one of the demons like a doll. Jimmy looked at Dean, knowing the haunted look on the fan's face as well. He had been all too well aware during their time in Silent Hill, more likely because Castiel's hold had been so loose, so human. Their connection had been strong enough for Jimmy to catch glimpses from Castiel's thoughts. Glimpses of what plagued Dean when he looked at that pyramid head creature. Glimpses of Dean when Castiel rinsed him out of hell. Something even Dean didn't remember. Jimmy shuddered. Dean? Sam panicked when Dean offered no words of his own. Yeah, Dean managed, shaking his head. She's slow, and he's busy. But the weapons... Dean grimaced, looking at the spot where they had not retrieved their weapons. A small pile that Lilith descended upon, and crushed whence he lunged for them. Not that any conventional weapon would necessarily work, or do any harm to her. "We can't just move out of the way and hope for the best," Sam said. "There aren't any other exits. We won't be able to do anything against the both of them once he's done." Sam's lips twitched when he said that. He turned away from the scene at the doors. Sam and Dean both had to turn away. Jimmy was glad he was looking at the Winchesters, and deciding that they couldn't stomach what they were seeing, he didn't want to look either. As they stood there, at a loss for how to defend themselves, Lilith was picking up speed. Blades ready. Monstrous forms still leaking oil that seemed to cry out for a spark. If a fire started, they would burn faster than they could be crushed or sliced apart. "Hey," Dean said, nudging Sam and Jimmy to both look to the line of bleachers along the wall behind them. The bleachers were becoming metal too, with liberal smears of blood and sharp edges despite the missing benches. And there was a panel on the other side of the room that looked like it could control them, automating whatever they folded out and pressed against the wall. Dean was grinning when he looked at them again. "Either of you see the faculty?" he said. Jimmy wasn't sure what Dean was referring to, but Sam looked somewhere between wary and strangely impressed. "Good as a plan as any," Dean shrugged. "We'd better watch ourselves climbing through that thing," said Sam. "Climbing through?" Jimmy gaped. The brothers still had a hold of Jimmy's arms and started pulling him along toward the rusty, sharp-looking bleachers. "Run! Hide! You've already lost so much more than you know," came a voice that was, and was not the little girl Lilith had been possessing. It echoed something deeper, something older, and not used to speaking. It made Jimmy shudder again. He didn't want to look back and see how close he was. He didn't want to look ahead where he was being dragged to either. But somewhere in the back of his mind, he was starting to understand what Dean intended to do. Climbing through the metal bars was tedious, falling amidst a mass of metal that would slice him up as cleanly as Lilith or Pyramid's head's blades. Too firm a grip sliced Jimmy's hand clean open, but he was mildly comforted to be in the middle as they moved beneath the bleachers, somewhat shielded with Dean leading Sam and behind them. Jimmy found himself crouching and crawling more than climbing, to avoid further cuts. He could hear Lilith falling after them, hear the creak and crash of metal as she forced her way beneath the bleachers without a care to the simple cuts. The trek had seemed endless, a labyrinth, and Lilith was gaining somehow, despite being so large. Jimmy then saw Dean finally reach the end, turning back to hold a hand to help Jimmy as well. The other side of the bleachers was as tight of a corner of the room, but from there they could reach the controls. Jimmy looked back through the bleachers to see Sam was a ways behind them yet, having more trouble due to the extra inches in height. Lilith was dangerously close behind him, her knives lifting above Sam's head and trying to unsuccessfully swipe downwards. "Dean! Do it!" "But Sari!" "We don't know if it's even going to work. Just do it!" Dean hesitated a moment more before lunging for the controls. There were two large black switches, hands uncharacteristically trembling. Dean flipped one close. Nothing. "Shit!" Dean flipped both switches the other direction. Nothing. Dean flipped the switches back the other way and slammed his fist against the panel. The shriek of metal was terrible. Jimmy went nauseous at the thought of Sam getting caught, crushed by those bleachers like so much loose flesh. But when he turned back, the taller Winchester was darting out of the bleachers and falling relieved against the wall. Lilith, in her overly large form, was still crawling through the sharp beams of metal, the noise only growing more terrible as the bleachers began to fold up so quickly that it made Jimmy flinch and shuffle back until he ran into Dean by the controls. He exhaled when he felt Dean grab his arm. Lilith was too large to escape before she would be crushed. "Come on!" Dean hissed, pulling Jimmy along yet again to get out from the corner of the bleachers. When they darted free, running until they were in the hallway to the other side of the gym, Dean stopped, and Jimmy plowed into him, followed moments later by Sam crashing into them both. They steadied and Dean turned back to look, grimacing with such a potent expression. Jimmy wasn't really why they turned to look too. With a final screech of metal, the bleachers were closed, as flat as they could be against the wall. And what remained of the god was so much more loose flesh than Jimmy had briefly imagined of the crushed sham. There was blood and gore between every crack, flowing out onto the floor and mixing with the oil that had been seeping from the creature's skin. And then, crawling in front from the midst of it all, at the very end of the bleachers, where Jimmy and the Winchesters made their escape, was Lilith, the little girl, drenched in red, but somehow uninjured. Dean was still holding on to Jimmy, but made no move to pull him away this time. Lilith looked exhausted, like a human recently vacated by a demon, or an angel, or any other invading thing. Jimmy couldn't help a small surge of validation in that. A demon finally feeling what it meant to be violated by something too powerful for them to comfortably contain. Of course, Jimmy felt guilty the moment he thought of it like that, because he knew Castiel too intimately to blame the angel for needing him. He knew it wasn't the same. It was just incredibly satisfying to see Lilith looking so tired and beaten. She couldn't move her body much further than pulling it free of the bleachers, collapsing right where she was, looking over at them with one moment of pure fury, before she grinned, and it made Jimmy shudder deeply again. The metal stopped shrieking, but a new sound overtook it, as the girl's voice rose in a scream, and black smoke shot out of her mouth like a whirlwind.
She's gonna be pissed,
said Dean, with something of a hoarse chuckle. Wait, does that mean we won, or is the seal still broken? I asked Sam. Jimmy sighed, knowing some remnants of what Castiel had learned about the seal before they entered the town.
It's safe,
Jimmy said. The seal only breaks fully if the god destroys the last of the people summoned here, and moves beyond the limit of Silent Hill. Killing it should resist everything. After a moment, the black smoke was gone. Lilith was gone, leaving a limp body that Dean and Sam both flinched towards, as if to say, even though it was obvious, the little girl would not be alive. Dean, said Jimmy, tugging his arm that Dean was gripping so hard it almost hurt.
Sorry,
said Dean, releasing him and grinning a little crookedly.
Guess I was just returning the favor for how much you were dragging me around before. Well, not you,
he corrected himself, smile slipping and words fumbling as apology.
I know you're not the same, you're, not Cass, but I just...
Dean, it's okay, Then Jimmy's eyes caught a glint of light, and then he heard a renewed screech of metal. His gaze darted across the gym toward the doors, where Pyramid Head was dragging his blade in their direction.
Fuck! I forgot about him!
Gasped Dean, backing up on instinct, though the monster was a safe distance away from them, for now. Maybe we could get around him. He isn't much faster than Lilith.
That blade has a pretty wide arch,
Dean said stonily. That doesn't mean we shouldn't.
The sparks!
Jimmy shouted, but it was already too late by the time the words got out. The sparks from Pyramid's Head blade, being dragged along the floor, ignited the oil still seeping from the beaten god. Even though most of what surrounded them was metal, still being another world, everything that God touched erupted in flames.
We have to go! We can get around him!
Jimmy was paralyzed again, and Dean was no better, staring wide-eyed at the creature that was and was not him. The supernaturally growing flames gleamed in his green eyes, making them look almost possessed with the bright orange tints.
Dean! We'll be trapped! We can run!
The screech of Pyramid's Head's blade was terribly loud, louder than the roar of Sun and Blade.
Dean! Please!
Jimmy whirled on Dean, calling just as loudly.
Dean!
Dean's inflamed eyes cleared, and he blinked away the orange, looking back at Sam, then turning to acknowledge that Jimmy with eyes that was purely green.
You have to be light years faster to catch me,
Dean said. He yanked Sam forward, pushing both Sam and Jimmy closer to the far wall and urging them to run. They hugged to the wall as they went, Jimmy trying his hardest to stay focused on Sam's back, and the sound of Dean's feet behind him, rather than look to see that Pyramid Head had noticed them and was lifting his blade.
Just keep moving when I tell you to! Duck!
Dean shouted. There was comfort in that, too. not having to make a decision, to think of anything other than running straight ahead and listening for Dean's voice. Jimmy didn't look at anything other than Sam's moving shoulders as they ran. Didn't think. He barely breathed. Duck! And when Pyramid's head swung, the metal crashed against the wall, just as Jimmy dove to his hands and knees as flat as he could get to the ground. He could feel Dean sprawled over his ankles. He was tumbled over Sam's legs himself. Move! Dean's voice came again. Somehow, Jimmy was able to listen, scrambling back to his feet as swiftly as Sam and Dean and continued to run. What remained of the other demons was a slippery mess of carnage in front of the busted, open metal doors. Jimmy barely even paused. He leapt over the gore, hauling Sam through the doors and onward. There was the only sound of their feet, sound of breathing, the Vither in Pyramid's head dragging blade going fainter. Then they were bursting out into the bright haze of ash before Jimmy even realized that as the fire spread. So too was the normal world, spreading out and overtaking other world like some delayed reaction to Lilith's demise. Jimmy didn't want to pass out. He didn't want to end up on the concrete, only to wake and find that Pyramid Head or some creature had a hold of them, or had cleaved him in two while he was sleeping. He thought it must have been the adrenaline giving him a small reprieve, or any moment he would fall. All of them would fall and be out. But the nausea and blocking of vision never came. The other world was fading, parting like a curtain in front of them as they ran into the ash, just running and running down the street into the direction Jimmy knew the Impala was parked. There had to be a way out now. They had to be able to leave. But Jimmy knew. He knew what he learned from Castiel, how much higher the stakes really were. Maybe they would find when they reached the car was the same drop-off cliff to nothing. Come on, buddy! Keep up! Dean called back, having surpassed Jimmy long ago, looking more relieved and carefree as he ran than Jimmy had seen in a long time, even running for their lives. It was as if being close to that creature that was supposed to be him, not being overtaken, had been all that Dean needed to feel like he had won. The ash was brighter when they passed the last building out of town, blinding by the time they could see the Impala forming out of the haze. It was so bright, Jimmy couldn't see. He couldn't see anything. Then he heard a familiar voice. Do you accept me back, James Novak? Jimmy was hesitantly filled with both a feeling of overwhelming relief and a small bit of disappointment. He had almost been looking forward to riding in the Impala, something simple and human. But he knew what was needed of him was more important than his own desires. Yes, Castiel, he said, as the angel took him, and he thought he saw a flash of Dean and Sam's faces, looking at him curiously, before his thoughts faded into dreams. Bad ending. To reach this, do not find the locket. Don't go into the rooms with the broken bottles. Do not listen to Jonah's backstory. And have Sam kill the demon. They had reached the Impala, stalled in the road just as they left her. Sam went for the passenger door as he heard Jimmy's voice behind him. Yes, Castiel. Sam turned. Dean was there with him at the driver's side door, but Jimmy was still a few feet behind him in the ash, glowing. Cass! Dean called. But Sam wasn't as certain. Castiel had been banished from Silent Hill, leaving Jimmy behind to get a broken nose for his trouble, and something near a heart attack, no doubt, from their encounter with Lilith the God and escaping Pyramid Head. The angel should not have been able to return until he had left the limits of the town. As what was certainly not Castiel walked toward them to the ash, Sam could only look on in horror. He hated being right. It was Jimmy's body, still clad in so slippery in slacks, a dirty white button-down, still covered in blood from his broken nose even, but his eyes were black, so much darker than a demon's, and there were blades in his hands, like the ones Lilith had been wielding as a god. Oh, Jimmy, Sam said, backing up a step and debating if they could make it to the car, even if it would run when it had before. What the hell? Said Dean, twitching at first before he took a step forward. Cass? Dean. No, Sam said in warning. Such, such an easy boy to fool, spoke the thing that was not Castiel or Jimmy, but something with his voice, overlapping a dark one that wasn't used to speaking. He opened himself up so willingly. A demon's body was interesting, but the vessel of an angel. The god rolled Jimmy's shoulders as if he was settling into his skin more comfortably. Lilith had retained some control when the god was merged with her, but this was different. There was no Jimmy anymore, and definitely no Castiel. Sam wanted to go to Dean, pull him back and pull him away, but he couldn't move. He was terrified Dean would do something foolish because of this perversion of that body. Someone he had considered a friend, angel or otherwise. But to Sam's relief, Dean was the one who called out, "Run!" Sam turned just as Dean did, both of them sprinting away from the car to head out to town. There was still a chance. There was always a chance, Sam told himself, even as the ash was clearing to reveal the truth. Or, rather, the edge. The cliff was still there, dripping down into nothing to trap them into town. Defeating the god Lilith had not been enough. Shit! Shit! Dean, what do we do? I don't know, Dean. I don't know! The words of the god seemed to come from all around them, terrible in Castiel's deep voice. You fail to realize what you lost the moment you entered the town, it said. Sam didn't want to turn around. He didn't want to see Cass with those awful eyes. It was legitimate, paralyzing fear he was feeling, something he was rarely used to as a hunter. He wasn't allowed to feel fear when he had often had to play the part of a hero. But this fear made Sam contemplate for that one awful moment, stepping off the ledge. "We stopped you!" Dean whirled around, shouting and shaking for how much he was trying to remain firm and grounded. "We saved the seal! We won!" "You say that as if you expect there to be rules. And there are," said the god. Sam saw how close it was when he turned around. Finally, and had to step closer to the damn thing, for fear tipping backwards. The body of Jimmy was only a few arms' length away. You belonged to the town the moment you crossed over. All you did was kill one simple form and injure a useless demon. You prevented the breaking of a seal, yes, but you did not stop me." Sam didn't understand. He assumed the seal was, all this really meant. But clearly, the god of Silent Hill was part of something more. They were trapped, didn't have any weapons. They were sore, wounded, and tired. The god had Castiel's body and blades in his hands. It was over. Sam didn't understand at first when nothing happened. The god didn't attack them. It didn't lunge forward with its blades and push them off the cliff into the abyss. It turned and looked at Dean, just as a figure began to appear out of its side from the ash. "The town limits you now, but it will grow. We will grow, and you are always so much a part of it, Dean." Sam didn't miss the way Dean flinched to hear that and be addressed so familiarly. Even with his own shortness of breath, at the sight of Pyramid Head suddenly there at the god's side, like some horrible bodyguard. He was a monstrous thing. Oversized, menacing. Sam hated how much he could still see Dean hiding inside. Some part of Dean that was that thing. No, Sam said, as he thought about that. He turned to look to his brother, beseeching, "It isn't you, Dean. It's something you could have been. But you're stronger than that. We can run, Dean. Let's just run!" Because there was no other option, and even running would do them little good. But Dean didn't look at Sam. He was standing there, staring at that thing that was, it was not him, with all the fight drawn out of his face. "Dean, come," said the god, with Castiel's face and voice and a beckoning hand. Pyramid Head stepped forward, toward them. Jam jerked to move, to run as he had said, but he froze when he saw what the creature was holding. Lifting up and offering to Dean, not his sword, but another pyramid-shaped helmet. "Dean," Sam said again. Dean smiled. It wasn't like before, when he found some sense of himself to fight back. This was the same wicked, awful smile as when he had looked at Sam and said, "I like to use knives." Sam shivered to his bones. Dean took the offered helmet, the other pyramid head instantly vanishing, leaving its sword to clatter to the ground for Dean to retrieve. Dean still looked like Dean, despite the helmet in his hands, even when he tilted his head to finally looking like Sam to look at Sam. But everything had changed. Everything was wrong. "Well," Dean said, with a sonic shrug, lifting his helmet to set in place,
"if you can't beat 'em."
"Bad ending unlocked. Now, bunny ending. To lock this, find the picture of Sam and Dean within an apartment, then find a picture of them at the bunny farm, then find a picture of the bunny plushie." They had reached the Impala, perfect and beautiful as they had left her. Dean went for the door when he heard Simmy's voice behind him. "Yes, Castiel." Dean looked back around. Sam was there with him at the passenger door, but Jimmy was a few feet behind him, and he asked, glowing, "Cass!" Dean raced forward, certain that if Castiel had returned to them, it must mean they were saved. But when he reached the glowing form of what he thought would be the angel, there was nothing. Jimmy had vanished. Sam had caught up to him, equally stunned as he stared to where Jimmy had been. "What happened?" said Sam. "Where did he go? Did Cass leave us?"
"I don't know,"
said Dean. He couldn't believe Castiel would return for Jimmy, didn't just leave. "What's that?" Sam said, looking off the road into the distance. Dean turned. A small building was drifting in and out of view as the clouds of ash moved past it. He didn't remember anything being there before. The brothers moved there cautiously. Castiel's disappearance, accompanied by the sudden materialization of the small structure, was far too unsettling. Part of Dean wanted to head back to the Impala and just go. But they had to know. They couldn't risk that something might have happened to the angel. Sam pressed his ear to the door when they reached the building. It had no windows, no discernible features. It stood about the size of a shack. Yet it looked modern, completely new. "I don't hear anything," Sam said. Dean wished they could have some sort of weapons on them, but trusted there at least couldn't be more than one person, or more than one creature, that very large to fit inside such a small building. He took hold of the doorknob and unlocked it and pushed it open. Surveillance computers and equipment covered the entirety of the small building, blinking at them with screens showing all of Silent Hill. Dean stared at first, entranced by technology, but then his gaze turned to the lone chair in the room and dropped into his knees in belief.
"It was all you!"
Dean was sure he was losing his mind. On top of the chair, wearing what looked like a tiny headset, was a small, fluffy bunny. Anya, I knew it! And now for the ending you've all been waiting for, the UFO ending. Find the sacred medallion, go to the school, the gas station, and the hospital, and activate it. Sam and Dean reached the Impala, stalled in the road just as they left her. They each paused at their doors when Jimmy spoke. "Yes, Castiel." Jimmy's body was still a ways away from Sam and Dean when Castiel took him. It was easier than it had been the first time, when Silent Hill still had so much more power over him. This time, Castiel settled into familiar skin gladly, comfortably, and opened his eyes, humming with renewed power, glowing. "Cass!" Castiel smiled as he stepped out of the ash towards Sam and Dean, so pleased that they had managed to defeat Lilith, and the god, and everything turned out to be okay. The brothers were smiling too, as Castiel approached, moving away from the Impala to greet him, and such with relief in his presence at his return. The light that broke to the sky above was much brighter than Cass had been, so sudden, like a spotlight shining down on Sam and Dean from heaven itself. Only when Castiel looked up, there was no angelic being or sign from Father.
"Oh, you've got to be fucking kidding me!"
Dean grumbled, even as he and Sam were swept away. taking by the light itself into the floating saucer above. Castiel could only stare as the UFO soared off into the sky with Sam and Dean inside.
Huh. Don't see that every day.
Normal ending. Don't look for any of the collect all the items as normally, but don't listen to any of the people's backstories. By now, I think you have gotten the previous line, so let's just move on. Castiel had been banished to Silent Hill, leaving Jimmy behind to get a broken nose for his troubles, and something near a heart attack, no doubt, for their encounter with Lilith, the god, his scheming pyramid head. But with the god defeated, and the town returned to its equilibrium, enough that Castiel was able to return and heal Jimmy properly. Jimmy had shed blood in the town, but at least he was still free. Unlike Sam and Dean. Dean's expression was one of awe when Castiel stepped out of the ash. Sam, somewhat more skeptical than relieved to see that the angel had returned to the form they were used to, free of injury or blood, and once again wearing a suit and trench coat and loose tie. "What's wrong?" said Sam, reading Castiel more easily than Dean, since Dean seemed caught up in the sheer relief of seeing Castiel again. Castiel was warmed by the sentiment, but could not smile in return, and soon Dean's smile had vanished too.
"It's time I told you the truth. Why, I could not tell you before, or for fear you would endanger yourselves, or to steal to hear it. Please, forgive me."
"Cass?" Dean prompted, frowning now, brow furrowed as he took a few slow steps forward. Castiel turned away, staring at the dirt in the road that led him there, to this end.
"This town is cursed. To enter is a death sentence. Whether drawn here or a willing occupant, it has been that way for many decades. The road is often hidden, a paradox, appearing only when it is sought out, or seeking a close victim."
"Cass!" Dean said more firmly, because Castiel was stalling.
"Of course he was."
Castiel sighed.
"You were in an accident when you crossed the city limits, you remember?"
"Yeah," said Sam. "We were out for a couple of minutes." Tense, unsure of how they were going to react, Castiel forced his gaze to lift and meet the eyes of the brothers. He held them that.
"No, Sam."
"No, we didn't crash," said Dean.
"You didn't survive,"
said Castiel. He passed his hand over the Impala, disrupting the illusion so Sam and Dean could see the truth. Their bodies were still inside the car. Their real bodies. Sam's head was crashed against the side window, streaking it with blood and gore. His eyes glazed but half open. Dean had been slammed forward to the steering wheel, hiding what had to be a horrifically damaged face. They were still, frozen, not yet rotting since so little time had passed, almost as if the accident had just happened. Sam stumbled away from the car, pale-faced and staring wide. Dean's expression was harder to read, his face half hidden for Castiel with how he was turned. But Castiel saw Dean's hands start to shake before he turned to the fist.
"You are not the first to be taken by this town,"
Castiel said, looking around at the other vehicles that had come to view when he lifted the illusion. The road around them was covered in cars, trucks, and other vehicles, all along the sides to the ditch. Dozens of them, all with varyingly decayed bodies inside. Sam stumbled again, trying to get away from a truck that was supposedly right behind him with a pursuingly gruesome corpse, only to hit the door of the Impala. His door, with his body inside. He spun around and started backing down the road toward Cass and Dean. "What is this?" Sam said. "How did this happen? All these people!" "And us," Dean said, his voice tight and controlled.
"Anyone who enters the town is already dead," said Castiel. "Aaron was as well, and Jonah, and Charlie. Now they are part of the town. Jimmy is the only exception, because he was brought here by me, not pulled into the town, or caught in any accident along the road. If he died here, he would be trapped as well, but you kept him safe. Thank you."
"What do you mean, trapped as well? We're trapped! We can't leave!"
"You can now, but only as spirits. And I believe you already know what happens to spirits."
Sam looked almost entirely white now. The shock of it, Castiel managed, since Sam and Dean both been prepared for death, given their profession. But for it to sneak up on him like this, like a trick! Castiel understood the distress. He did. He felt it too, for their sakes. I will not leave you to the town or to the earth, Castiel said, stepping forward, wanting to comfort them, however fleetingly. I can take you from here. The town is weak enough now, and you survived your trials. I can bring you to heaven if that's what you wish.
And then what?
Said Dean.
What happens to Silent Hill? Does it disappear?
The town will remain. Its power over all is too great. So other people will end up like us? Like Charlie, Aaron, and Jonah? The sale is safe, but the guy could just try again? Castiel looked back at the road. He knew what they were both thinking. It was unfair. But Silent Hill was more than just a seal. It was a living, breathing part of hell set on Earth. He knew of no way to truly stop it. Not forever. The sound of movement on the pavement made Castiel look up again. Dean was moving around to the back of the Impala, going for the trunk. He gripped it open and started rummaging for the contents. Sam moved to join him. In the blink of a movement, Castiel was behind them both, staring at the inside of the trunk as Dean was gathering new weapons and extra ammo.
What are you doing? I'm not going out like this,
Dean said.
No hanging out the towel. Well, at least it was a cool ride, bullshit. This place thinks it can beat me, then I'm going to figure out how to beat it.
But Dean, Castiel pleaded, frowning when Sam followed suit with his brother. The rules remain the same for you. Charlie, Aaron, will be new creatures like the ones you have seen before. If you die here, the same would happen to you. But if we survive, then maybe we could save a few people. At least keep them from ending up like Charlie and the others, said Sam. And if we're here long enough, maybe we could find out a way to close this place out to good.
Then you can take us to heaven, Cass, said Dean. But I'm not ready to call it quits just yet.
Castiel opened his mouth to say something else. Anything that might convince them that this was a fool's errand and would only end with them lost forever. But their determination was too potent. Every weapon they took, every extra bullet, their voices and resolve were set in stone. The burns on Sam's neck and the knife wound in Dean's shoulder would still there, and they would have to heal naturally, because they were spirits. Cass could not heal them. As long as they remained in Silent Hill, there were a certain amount of reality of what happened to them. They would no doubt suffer any other wounds as time went on. They did not need to eat or sleep, but they would feel hunger and exhaustion. It would be hell for them in time, too, even if they managed to survive. If you're certain, Cass said, give me a moment. Sam and Dean looked back at him, puzzled at what he meant. But Castiel believed they would at least wait for him, even if they could not explain what he intended to do. He appeared just outside the minutes of town, past the veil of death and ash that trapped Sam and Dean inside. They could not see him there, though in some ways he was only a few yards away from them. It was easy to release Jimmy's body, stepping back until he was looking at the familiar form instead of residing in it. Jimmy looked startled at first, touched his chest, in his crisp, undamaged clothing, his undamaged body, until he realized Castiel was behind him. Jimmy's eyes went wide, more used to feeling Castiel's presence than seeing him. I do not require a physical body any more for Silent Hill, Castiel said. Sam and Dean will not be blinded any longer to see me, and there are other ways if I give myself to the town. Give yourself to the town? Jimmy repeated, fear playing on his face, our eyes darting around his periphery, as if he feared being left right where he was. I'm sending you home, James Novak, but I want you to understand why. They need me. Jimmy looked as if afraid to protest, as Castiel had been about to protest Sam and Dean's decision. But in the end, the man held his tongue and nodded. Castiel reached out with his power to port Jimmy home, humbled to hear the man thank him as he vanished. Castiel did not think he deserved any thanks. It was Jimmy who had given the angel form, a human voice, an image that could be perceived by men that he started considering his own. And so, with the town's help, was more willing to give for how much power it drained Castiel. He took the form of Jimmy again, wholly as himself. Dean noticed his return first. The other brothers were finished arming themselves, and were closing up the car for their return to town. Castiel couldn't help a moment of fear that his form, however changed, would be painful for Dean to look at. But Dean just smiled.
Cass?
He said, like he wasn't sure.
Am I crazy or is it only you in there?
Castiel was not surprised that Dean could tell the difference, though, at a glance, he looked like he had just had when he was Jimmy. Though he decided forming the image of the same clothing beyond the slacks and button down. Wait. Only you? Repeated Sam. You mean that's not Jimmy's body? You let him go? Sam said, as the last of his realization, more than another question. I will be just as great a risk as you, but there's no need to put James at risk as well.
You sure you want to do this?
Dean said, even as he was handing Castiel a gun. Castiel took the weapon gladly. It is already done. Dean grinned at Cass as they headed back into town, fully armed, together, and any circumstance that would be any consequences after that would be well worth it. Good ending. See all the flashbacks, grab the items, and also find a picture of Sam and Dean. Okay, you know the intro. They reached the Impala. Jimmy agreed to Kaz being reproduced. Dean was looking at Kaz as Dean was looking for, walking toward him out of the ass. Done. That was a very foolish and ingenious plan, Dean, Castiel said, smiling. I hate to admit to you that Lilith will no doubt be more powerful than ever once she recovers. Even if the god's power was only with her for a short time, she could do very little if the seal remains protected. Thank you. The last bit of relief Dean needed to know for certain that they would be okay filled him with a rush he couldn't help but laugh. He had to laugh. He couldn't believe that the end had been so easy. Well, not easy. If avoiding being slashed by giant blades, running through a death trap of set of bleachers to catch an evil god was supposed to be easy. Some good people had been lost. But they had won and lived to tell the tale. The worst had come out of it all was Sam's burns and the knife wound in Dean's shoulder, which seemed to all ache with newfound resilience now that his adrenaline had started to fade. Years of having to fight while injured almost made Dean forget the injury. It was always the same when that didn't last.
Shit!
He cursed, though he was still laughing.
On second thought, Sammy, I think you better drive. Your neck okay?
Sam was smiling, like he was deliriously relieved as Dean. He touched his neck as if he had also forgotten being wounded, but didn't flinch. Good enough.
The way back is clear, right, Cass?
Dean turned to the angel, who had freed him fully now and was standing before Dean. The town has released you, said Castiel, but it would be in your best interest to be swift and never to return to this town again. I don't need to hear that twice, said Sam. He was already moving around the Impala to take the keys. Dean handed them over somewhat reluctantly and stopped in front of Castiel before moving to the passenger door. The angel was still smiling, which was rare since he usually looked impressive and passive and serious if anything.
You okay?
Dean said with another chuckle.
This isn't so different from every other day in our lives, you know? Though, I feel like I might sleep for a week.
Castiel nodded vaguely, but didn't move or say anything.
You planning on catching a ride, or are you going to stand there staring at me creepily for the next?
Dean actually flinched when Castiel drove forward to embrace him. He was only a touchy-feely guy when it came to chicks. Or his little brother. He was not generally physical with friends or family. He could probably count the number of times he hugged his brother on one hand. At least, from the point Sam turned 13 and decided he was an adult. The early years were a little different. But, considering they had just survived a new level of hell, literally, Dean decided it would be in bad taste to push Castiel off. He let the angel sink in and wrap his arms around him. He had patted Castiel's back a few times before it started to get awkward.
I, love you too, man, but, you're kind of hugging the arm that was stabbed!
Castiel made a noise that might have been a sniffle and pulled away, frowning. My apologies. I'm just very pleased you will not become permanent residents of the town. I would not waste that fate on anyone, least of all you. The comment silvered Dean. He sighed, trying to keep his thoughts away from Pyramid Head, and how close that he'd become to becoming that thing. Thanks, Cass, said Sam, hovering by the Impala door, with a look that said that he really didn't want to move and risk being embraced in turn. Dean shook his head, mustering another smile, before he smacked Cass's shoulder. Jimmy's shoulder.
Could have done without you,
he said, hoping that both occupants of the body got the message.
So, want a lift?
Castiel could just bamf as always, meet them wherever they were going, or just make it scarce for a while, until the next seal was in danger. But he looked remarkably pleased to hear Dean's suggestion. Castiel nodded, immediately vanishing. When Dean took to the car, he was not surprised to see the Angel taking up the back seat. Dean was pretty sure he could have made some sort of "God is my co-pilot" comment, but was too tired to be clever.
Get us out of here, Sammy,
Dean said as he and Sam climbed into the car. You got it. It was about that time they were passing over what could have been a giant cliff only hours ago that Dean's temp deck jumped to life, playing his Styx tape that he certain had been ruined. Dean didn't like to question miracles, but he couldn't help but glancing back at Cass and wondering. As they headed away from the town to safety, Dean closed his eyes and let the song wash over him. America spells competition. Join us in our blind ambition. Get yourself a brand new motor car. Someday soon we'll stop to ponder what on earth spell we are under. We've made the grade and still we wonder who the hell we are. The end. Good golly, this was 3 parts, and was it worth it? Yes, it was! Oh, okay. Final thoughts. What do I have left to say about this fic? Well, first off, let me get this away. I love Sam and Dean in this, and Cass. Perfectly, beautifully in character. This was the Sam and Dean I was missing from the past few seasons. I love their interactions. How each of them supported each other and yet still argued like brothers. But you could still see the love and deep connection that they had with each other. And I love how Cass was slowly feeling like a brother to them too, wanting to protect them. And we saw just how much he cared for them. How he generally saw them less of his chargers and more like somebody that he needed to be with. I love how each of their bonds shone through this. How when they were worried, they were there to support each other. How they tried to hide their fears, but knew it was there. It became less of a debilitating thing and more like a thing to keep them focused. I also like the side characters as they once again fit the Silent Hill motif of people being punished for their sins. All 3 of them. Even though I know I was joking about Aaron's incest. Never again. But still, it was pretty dang awesome to see. I also started liking Lilith, because, as I pointed out, even though I'm with Linkara when he complains about that one girl in the Silent Hill comics, this one made sense. And speaking of Silent Hill, speaking as a Silent Hill fanboy, oh, sweet heavens, why do these fanfic writers get what professionals don't? A guy who wrote the comics, do you see how she used Lilith? Was Lilith cussing up a storm? No. Was she insulting people? No. She was just being insane and demented. You know, kind of like certain characters from Silent Hill, you know, the game you were trying to adapt. Hey, movie director, do you see this coming off as some poorly done creature flick? No. Again, this writer got it. Psychological trauma, psychological torture, and I know that some of the creatures that we saw here were basic Silent Hill monsters, but I like the way she was able to put each one of them in and made them work for the brothers. Even Pyramid Head, where I would normally be annoyed, was put in pretty dang well. I love seeing Pyramid Head was basically Dean. You know, Dean's more monstrous side. The one that hunts, the one that punishes, the one that destroys. The burnt kids, Sam and Dean's lost innocence. That one acid-spitting creature, sometimes the inner secrets that they are forced to keep from each other that just builds up and spews like acid. The nurse, well, Jessica. Heck, even the ass felt more like deferring. That's what happened to Sam and Dean's mom and Jessica. The only thing that was needed now was a couple of yellow-eyed demons, or something representing Sam and Dean's dad, or something to represent the Apollo. I would have loved each one of those because that would have really got into their minds. But this did pretty dang well for what it set out to do. It gave us a pretty interesting Silent Hill crossover that felt very dang normal, and the alternate endings were good. And of course, the grammar and spelling was excellent. And so we came to the end of Halloween, and I know I'll be doing this again. But, you know, I think I realize just why I love these shows like Silent Hill. I mean, like, love these shows, Supernatural, and Buffy, or even something like Hellboy. See, I grew up watching horror movies, and I've never been afraid. Why? Not just because they were fantasy, but one thing I've always noticed about things like Jason, Freddy, or vampires, something that Monster Squad showed off, was that each of those beasts were beaten someday. They were taken down. They were destroyed. And people like Sam, and characters like Sam, Dean, and Buffy, and our boy Hellboy remind us of something. That yes, there are things that go bump in the night, be they illusionary or real. But there will always be things that bump back. So, Crimson, thank you for an excellent fic. And next week, I know, Trixie, you better get ready because you know what you're going to have to sit through. I know. Just please make it gentle, Fondue. I was loving life. See you boys next time. Carry on, wayward sons.